Hello and welcome to chapel at United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. This is Holy Week Chapel. It's a special teaching chapel. And if you like coming to these experiences where you hear a prophetic word, where folks are sharing their authentic selves, then like the video and subscribe to this channel, and you'll get updates about all the chapels that are upcoming that are led by our students with disabilities, our Trans Visibility Day Chapel, our prophetic faculty chapels, and all the different senior chapels that are coming your way. In this special teaching chapel, we are in the midst of Holy Week. And that means the week is off for the seminary. We don't have classes that week. And we don't have classes makes sense to some students and it doesn't to others. And we wonder why we take a whole week off for an Easter celebration on Sunday, where most churches are focused in the coming week. Does it really take a whole week to plan that one celebration? Well, that's kind of what we're going to address today, because Holy Week is a whole series of events that begins certainly with Lenten practices, moving from the wilderness into the formal experience of the Passion of Jesus. And Lent really makes a difference when you enter the Holy Week. If you've gone through the wilderness, if you've actually done some transformative work, and many people fast during that wilderness journey. We know that it's not just the Catholic Church that engages in those kind of fasts, but spiritual people all over the planet in different denominations and different faith traditions actually use fasting to find a way to find deeper meaning, a deeper sense of their faith. And so many people engage in some sort of fast as they move into this Holy Week experience that begins with a Sunday that is way too much for any one Sunday service. To have a Palm Sunday celebration that marks this entry into Jerusalem for Jesus, this humble king that comes into our midst that confronts empire, that's a big deal. And it takes a service to kind of understand what the complexity of that holiday means, but it also is Passion Sunday in most Christian churches, where we try to fit in all the different passion narratives of the whole week that leads up to Easter so that folks can understand what happens on Easter Sunday. There's too much. And so somewhere along the way, the church, the liturgical traditions, thought this week of celebrations, of understandings, of deepening our experience was more meaningful. And so we invite folks into a whole week of understanding this passion narrative. There's lots of readings, lots of depth to mine in the midst of all this. Now, churches don't often do services like that, and more often, churches just do a Palm Sunday and then an Easter. But there are other services there, and they do matter. And as spiritual leaders, we want you to invite folks, if it's not to a church or a sanctuary on Sunday morning, or Thursday night, or Friday, or at any time during the day, it's into the practice, into the experience and the memory of these celebrations. The first major one after that Sunday of Palm Sunday and Passion is Maundy Thursday. And Maundy Thursday is really a time to remember the Last Supper. First time Jesus gathered with disciples and broke bread and offered the cup and said those words that we do in remembrance of him. It's a powerful celebration to remember that moment. And they were gathered in the midst of Passover, but I would encourage folks in the Christian tradition to not pretend that they know how to do a Passover celebration. Go to a Seder. Go to a Jewish home at their invitation and experience the depth of meaning in that celebration. For Maundy Thursday really is about taking what was meaningful in that place, acknowledging that this death was going to come and that they will know each other by your love. That's how Jesus addresses the disciples. They will know you by your love. And then Jesus takes the towel from his waist and washes the disciples' feet in this act of service and gratitude for the relationships that they have. This act of intimacy is right there on Maundy Thursday, and I encourage you to find a time in your life where you get to wash another's feet, where you get your feet washed by another. and engage in that intimate spiritual experience of being there, being present in that humble way for another. And Good Friday, of course, is leaning into the actual betrayal and the death of Jesus. And in order to understand Easter, I believe that we must invite people to participate in the Good Friday experience, because what Good Friday invites folks to do is to not just honor that Jesus died, but that we are in the crowd. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there? Well, many scholars believe that's a question for us. How are we there? Saying crucify him, denying him, seeing that we're too busy to really be confronted by acts of empire and acts of state. And so this is a radical event to move ourselves into that Good Friday experience. And if we stay in that death place for as long as it takes, and for many congregations, they will do a Saturday vigil, sit in the stories of the crucifixion, sit in the tearing of the temple curtain, sit in the earthquake, the fire of that death. Then we can go to the tomb, realize it's empty, and have Easter. The cycle of emotions and experiences during Holy Week can open us up to a much bigger understanding of our faith. And that's what I implore you to invite people to. And we know that other traditions do things bigger than us. And one of those in our Christian tradition is the Orthodox Church. And Dr. Jennifer Awes Freeman is going to give us a little glimpse of how to do this experience leading to Easter in a much bigger way. Thank you, Jennifer.
To talk about Holy Week and Pascha in the Orthodox tradition, we first have to back it up a bit and talk about Lent, and before that, even the preparation for Lent. As we often joke in the Orthodox Church, we're preparing to prepare, and really kind of preparing to prepare to prepare. A word about some of the sources, liturgical sources for some of the services that I'm going to talk about, and Lent and Holy Week in particular, or as a whole. Some of them date, or some of our accounts really of the liturgies date to at least as early as the 4th century CE. There's a very useful text for historians and liturgical historians known as Egeria's Travels. Egeria was, well, we don't know very much about her, but she was potentially from Spain. She was a woman who went on pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and also traveled to Egypt and Turkey, and recorded her experience. And she happened to be in Jerusalem during Holy Week, and so made observations about the liturgies that she witnessed there. So that's a useful source for us, though not the same thing as having the liturgical texts themselves, of course. Liturgical history is a complicated thing because you have a variety of traditions and, of course, not a lot of texts that survive from that time, and kind of like regional dialects. There are different regional traditions and liturgies. So it's a bit nebulous early on, but we do have accounts here and there, and some later liturgical texts that are part of a tradition, of course. So there's also important liturgical texts in the East, the Divine Liturgy, known as the Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and the Liturgy of St. Basil, both of which date to the 4th century, 5th century. And these liturgies are still practiced today in the Orthodox Church, but have had, of course, revisions and additions over the centuries. So to talk about preparing to prepare. Before Lent even starts, there's a 3-week period known as the Triodion, and this is the preparing to prepare. The word Triodion also refers to the liturgical book that's used through Lent and Pascha. But actually, even before the Triodion, there's a Sunday that kicks that off, and that's known as Zacchaeus Sunday, after the tax collector whose life was changed because he sought to see who Jesus was. And he climbs up in this tree, according to the text in Luke 19. So it's the desire to see Jesus that initiates the Lenten journey. The first Sunday of the Triodion after that is that of the publican and the Pharisee, or the tax collector and the Pharisee. This is a parable that Jesus tells where there's a Pharisee who's praying in the temple and basically says, "Thank God I'm not like other people, especially this tax collector over here." And meanwhile, the tax collector is so ashamed of his own choices, things like that, his actions, that he can't even look up to heaven, but kind of beats his chest and says, "Lord, have mercy." So this is an image of prayer and repentance, right? And the Pharisee often gets kind of judged for being judgy himself, but maybe that's not being fair. Really, together, those two tell us that it's neither religious piety nor repentance alone that saves us. These are, of course, religious piety and practice is good, and humility and repentance is good, but it's more than those two things. And the church gives us these texts before Lent as a reminder to not judge our neighbor, but to seek God's mercy. The second Sunday is of the Triodion is known as that of the prodigal son. This is the son who takes his inheritance early and goes and spends it, and kind of loose living, as the text is interpreted sometimes, and then comes back to himself, kind of realizes what he's done, and returns to his father. And before he can even really apologize, his father welcomes him with open arms. And so this is our call to come to ourselves, to kind of, for self-awareness, to realize the implications of the choices we've made and so on, and to seek forgiveness, to kind of return home, as it were. And it's not just to consider ourselves as the prodigal son, but also, as my priest father Jonathan puts it, to embrace the prodigality of the world. So to see, to be ready to welcome home anyone who's coming to themselves, right? Who's reckoning with these things, and not in any kind of bargaining way or with conditions, but to unconditionally welcome someone who needs it. The third Sunday of the Triodion, I should say, no, that's fine. The third Sunday of the Triodion is known as the Sunday of the Last Judgment, or Judgment Sunday, and Meat Fair Sunday. So it's called that of the Last Judgment. It has the text of the sorting of goats and sheep. So it sounds like kind of apocalyptic, kind of scary, being judged. But we're being judged. The kind of measure of judgment is the love of God. The law is love, as it were. And we're judged not just by our intentions, but by our actions. So the liturgical text includes the gospel reading in which Jesus says, basically, whatever you do for the least of these, you did for me. So we are compelled and reminded to care for the marginalized, for the disenfranchised, for those who are incarcerated, for those who are unhoused. These are the people we should be serving, right? So not just by our intentions, but by our actions. It's called Meat Fair Sunday because it's the last Sunday of eating meat. During Lent, Orthodox Christians, many Orthodox Christians, not all, fast from meat and dairy and wine and olive oil. So basically a vegan diet. This is always done pastorally. So to each as they're kind of able. If someone has a medical condition or takes a medication that requires them to have a certain diet, or they're pregnant or nursing, things like that. The expectation is you do what you can do. What's important is that you decide for yourself and your family, and then that's your kind of commitment for Pascha. And the idea of fasting is not some kind of ascetic, contest, or to have some kind of like purity or something like that, but is about kind of raising your intention, setting this time apart, cultivating like just awareness and the kinds of choices that you're making in your life, and also to have more time at a practical level, in theory, more time and money to, again, to serve others, to serve your neighbors in the community, whether that's volunteering more or donating resources, etc. So the Sunday then that kicks off Lent is that of, it's known as Forgiveness Sunday and also Cheese Fair Sunday. So Cheese Fair Sunday, because it's the last Sunday for eating dairy food, at my congregation, which is historically Russian and Ukrainian, we have a lot of blini with all kinds of delicious toppings on that Sunday. And that evening, we have Forgiveness Vespers. This is more or less a regular Vesper service, but then halfway through the service, the altar cloths are all changed from their regular kind of goldish yellow color to purple, and we shift to Lent. The tonal system of the music shifts to a minor key, basically, and then after this, we'll celebrate the Liturgy of St. Basil instead of St. John Chrysostom, which is the usual liturgy on Sundays. The end of that service includes it's known as the rite of forgiveness, where basically everyone in the church kind of lines up and ends up asking forgiveness of every other person in the church with a crossing themselves or a prostration and embrace. And the kind of dialogue there is, forgive me, or God, or forgive me. You might say, forgive me, a sinner. You could say the name of the person you're talking to if you know them, but you're asking forgiveness of everyone, whether you know them or not. And then the response is, God forgives. So we initiate Lent, in other words, having kind of sought forgiveness in our community. The first week of Lent, there are a series of liturgies of the Canon of St. Andrew. It's a Compline service, so a nighttime service. And these are penitential verses, mostly consists of a long series of penitential verses and these odes. The penitential verses are kind of punctuated by the refrain, Lord have mercy, which is sung by the choir and the people attending. And then it also concludes with the prayer of St. Ephraim, which is a penitential prayer that you hear throughout Lent, which includes also full-bodied prostrations. And I won't read it here for time, but encourage you to look it up if you'd like. So that's Monday through Thursday, and then Friday would be a separate Compline service. And then Saturdays throughout Lent, as throughout the whole year, there would be a Saturday night Vespers, and then Sunday Divine Liturgy. Something that's distinct about Lent is that on Wednesdays, we have what's called the pre-sanctified liturgy. And this is, it's called pre-sanctified because basically on the Sunday before, the clergy will prepare extra Eucharist, so extra bread and wine, and then for the people to have in the service on Wednesday. And so this is a kind of, like to get those fast days, like a little rest stop on the way to Sunday. I don't know, a little thing to sustain the faithful in their Lenten journey, whether they're fasting or not. And this is a service that we know is found in 7th century texts, but it was an earlier practice as well. In this service, there's a silent procession of the gifts of the Eucharist after the choir sings this very somber kind of hymn, "Behold, the King of Glory enters, behold the mystical sacrifice." So this kind of gets us through, and in my community, after we have pre-sanctified on Wednesday, then we'll go across the street to our community hall and have a potluck meal together. And the calendar that I'm sharing is the one that reflects the liturgies in my community during Lent. A larger church like the cathedral would have a lot more services, or even more services. So turning to Holy Week. Holy Week starts actually even before, in a sense, before Palm Sunday with Lazarus Saturday. And this is a morning divine liturgy where we celebrate Jesus's raising of Lazarus from the dead. And in that we have already an image basically of, or a foreshadowing of, the resurrection of Jesus. Then of course, Palm Sunday, the next day, where we process outside of the church with palm branches, singing the hymn, "Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest." And so there's this celebratory tone even as we're moving towards Good Friday. Monday and Tuesday night is a service called the Bridegroom Matins, and it has, as the name indicates, a kind of mystical, bridal mysticism kind of connotation to it. And it's matins, but it happens at night because the liturgical day starts the evening before. Wednesday is the service of Holy Unction. We do that Wednesday night, which is in remembrance of the woman who anointed Jesus's feet with oil. And those in attendance are blessed with oil, anointed with oil on their foreheads at the end of the service. Thursday morning, there's a divine liturgy. And this is also the day that we're remembering the Last Supper. And then Thursday evening, there's a matin service in which the 12 Passion Gospels are read. So really the telling of all of the different accounts of the crucifixion. And then, let's see, it's during that, after that service, no, it's not after that service. So we have the gospel reading, sorry. Then there's so many services, I have to remember where they all go. Then Good Friday, there's a reader service in the morning. So that just means that there's not a priest celebrating. Friday afternoon, there's the service of the unnailing. So many churches will have a cross set up in the center of the church for Good Friday. And at the service of the unnailing, the body, it depends what the church has, but in ours it's an icon that's a cross that has this body on it that can be taken off. And so the body is taken off and then placed on a tomb in the center of the church, and there are flowers and so on around it. And then that evening there's a matin service with the Lamentations. This is a kind of funeral service, basically, and so we have that tomb in the center of the church. It's covered in a liturgical cloth called the epitaphios that has an image of the dead Jesus laid out, and that is we go around the church in really a kind of funeral procession, and then two people will hold the cloth up in front of the door, kind of across in front of the door of the church, and so the congregants re-enter the church by kind of bowing underneath the epitaphios. So it's this very quite kind of literal imagery that we enter the church through the death and resurrection of Jesus. After that service, there's then an all-night prayer vigil. And this is one where in my community, people sign up for in pairs for 1 hour slots where they read scripture at the tomb. And it goes all night long. And then Saturday morning, there's a Paschal Vigil in the morning and Divine Liturgy Saturday morning. And I think this is the one where we have there's already this, even as it's in those kind of in-between moments, there's already celebration. So there's a part of the liturgy where the deacons come out and are throwing rose petals and bay leaves in the air, and a kind of anticipating the celebration of the Eucharist, or the resurrection already, rather. And then at night at 11:30, there begins the celebration. So it starts with nocturnes and matins, so the late night and early morning prayer services, the hours. And at midnight, around midnight, all of the lights of the church are turned off, and then a candle is lit in the altar, and everyone in the church has their own little beeswax candle, and that light is passed from the altar out into the whole church. And so pretty soon everyone's candles are lit, and we start singing the hymn. I'm not gonna be able to, I won't sing it, but the angels in heaven. It's one of those things where I can only do it if I'm singing it. The angels in heaven do saying, "O Christ, of your resurrection, make us on earth worthy to hymn thee with a pure heart," something like that. But at this kind of somber, slowly sung song, as we walk and process outside of the church, all around the church, coming back to the front doors, which are now closed. And then sometimes the priest will bang on the door, not too loud to wake up our neighbors, but we'll knock on the door, and then we start shifting into Easter celebration. So the church has become the tomb. We sing, "Let God arise, let his enemies be scattered." This is the day that the Lord has made, those kinds of things. And then we start singing the Paschal hymn, which is, "Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life." And then the clergy will say, "Christ is risen," and the congregation will respond, "Indeed, he is risen." We move into the church, and all the lights are on, and then we move into a regular divine liturgy service of a Sunday morning, which is about an hour and a half. And so this is punctuated by the clergy taking turns going around the church with a censer, sensing it and shouting, "Christ is risen," and the church saying, "Indeed, he is risen." In our community, we do that in as many languages as people know in the community, usually something like a dozen. And so it has a very celebratory feel, of course. All of these services end, I suppose, around 2 o'clock in the morning or so. And then we go across the street to our little community hall and have a big potluck, kind of agape meal, where we break the fast together. And each family or person brings a basket of their kind of offerings with like wine and cheeses and meats and desserts and all kinds of things. And those get blessed, and then we share our meal together. And then everybody goes home and sleeps. And we come back a little before noon and have another short prayer service. And then usually on Monday, we have a kind of another little service, matins, and have a potluck brunch together. So, and that week following is Bright Week, where there's only a couple of services. It feels pretty empty after the busyness of Holy Week. But I hope, it's not too overwhelming to just narrate all of that. Of course, each of these has their own texts, all of the services I've just named. And it really does move through to build towards this kind of the event that is Pascha or Easter. And I would say that the sermon that's preached on Easter night is always the one written by St. John Chrysostom, actually. So it's been read for a very long time, and it's short and sweet, but it basically says, in effect, for somebody who's kept the fast this whole time, welcome. And for those of you who are just joining us at the 11th hour and haven't kept the fast, you're welcome. Anybody who, whatever way you've engaged with this or not, come and join the celebration. And so there's a lot of kind of joy and conviviality in that. But anything you can do along the way is meaningful. So Orthodox Easter is on a different, or the Orthodox Lenten calendar is different from that of the West. And so actually this year our Easter won't happen until the first week of May, I guess. So there's plenty of time to come to services if you're interested in And if you have any questions, let me know. I hope it was helpful to give a sense of the richness of the Lenten and Paschal season.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for making that happen for us and helping us look at all the ways that we can experience this Easter time, this resurrection, the depth of meaning that can be possible if we invite folks into a Holy Week experience in whatever way is meaningful for them. To ignore Holy Week is to miss the chance to really, really get the transformative power of Easter. To miss out on fasting and sacrifice misses out on what happens when we are embodied as resurrection people living in hope and liberation for not just ourselves, but for everybody. And so take this Holy Week time and do something in your life. Fast for a meal. Wash someone's hands. Do something that acknowledges that we're different, that somehow we're moving into a different place, a liminal space, a threshold place, so that we can really get the beauty, the majesty, the brightness, the mystery of Easter. Have a wonderful Holy Week. We'll miss you. We'll see you back next week for 2 special chapels and more beyond. Thank you very much.